Hello, Wobbly Phil here. By the early 1970s, the British motorcycle industry was in terminal decline, brought about by ineffectual bosses, an historic sense of entitlement, a failure to listen to its customers, industrial strife, and production and design fails. In a last-ditch effort to bail out the sinking ship, in 1973 Norton merged with BSA Triumph to form Norton Villiers Triumph, under the powerful aegis of Manganese Bronze Holdings, a company which made its name with ship propellers, but which had become a vehicle for conglomerate ambitions. With the financial future somewhat secured, what the new MVT grouping desperately needed was new models with modern engines. There had been some tinkering around the edges, but high hopes were centered around two brand new power plants. BSA Triumph had already gone some way towards developing a Wankel Rotary engine with mixed results. Norton, on the other hand, had commissioned a new liquid-cooled DOHC parallel twin from the legendary British engine designers Cosworth. The fight for the future of British bikes was on. Like 1974's Rumble in the Jungle, two designs were going toe-to-toe for British motorcycling's heavyweight engine belt. In the blue corner was Norton's Cosworth engine, a liquid-cooled 750cc four-stroke twin nicknamed the Baby Cosworth because, as Norton's development engineer at the time explained to me in 2004 in very technical terms, it was two cylinders hacked off Cosworth's legendary 3-litre double four-valve V8 Formula 1 engine. In the red corner was BSA Triumph's Wankel Rotary engine, which had been undergoing stop-start development since way back in the 1960s. Both were in the frame to replace the existing Commando engine, the design of which could be traced back to the 1940s. BSA Triumph needed a £10 million bailout, more than £100 million in today's money, cash which the UK government didn't have at the time, struggling as it was to even keep the lights on. Hence the BSA Triumph merger with Norton to form NVT, which we used to joke back in the day stood for Not Very Terrific. The BSA lads had naturally assumed they would take charge of this new outfit, as they were the bigger motorcycle company. But as you can tell from the fact that the BSA name was omitted from the new group's title, they got a swift reality check. The man in charge would be former racing driver Dennis Poor, and he came from Manganese Bronze. Some might say his primary interest was BSA's London taxi-making arm, car bodies. Neither of the two contending lumps represented a particularly auspicious foundation for a new era. The Wankel, with its roots in the 1920s, was a Heath Robinson attempt to turn an air compressor into a viable internal combustion engine. But despite being hailed in the 1960s as the future, and despite millions in development dosh being poured into it by the likes of Mazda, NSU and Suzuki, it was rapidly becoming the past, as it was akin to a two-stroke when it came to polluting the atmosphere. And the atmosphere was something that environmentalists were increasingly shouting about in the 1970s.
Obviously, of all the environmental plagues they were protesting today, the least of these was noise pollution.
By 1973, BSA had produced a prototype, a single-rotor air-cooled engine with a carburetor rear of the rotor, which caused problems with overheating and burnt-out engines. They needed to go back to the drawing board, which meant more development costs. Develop they did and raided their much-diminished piggy bank for a license from NSU to produce engines that made between 35 and 60 bhp at 5,000 RPM, at a cost of £129,000. That's more than £1.5 million in 2025 money. Meanwhile, the poor management at Norton were carrying on the fight by rowing their own boat with the Cosworth engine, possibly because of their boss's connection with Grand Prix racing. It was initially destined to be the heart of a race bike in a custom Norton frame, to be called the Norton Challenge P86. I had the great honour of filming with Norton's original 1970s racing design team in the early 2000s as they reconstructed the original Challenge P86 that was lost in the devastating fire at the National Motorcycle Museum in September 2003. The idea was to eventually bring it into production as the beating heart of a new Commando. So, which of these two very different approaches won out? Well, unlike the Rumble in the Jungle, which produced a surprise knockout win for Muhammad Ali in the 8th round, the brawl in Birmingham was only ever going to end one way. MVT's chairman, Dennis Poor, mullered BSA's plans in order to follow his Cosworth pipe dream. Despite the machine's lackluster performance on the racetrack, and despite it being potentially less future-proof because it wasn't designed in-house. But before it got much further, MVT went bosoms skyward. George Foreman didn't get a rematch with Muhammad Ali, but there is a twist in this tale of two engines. In a convoluted kind of way, you could argue that the defeated Wankel actually did go on to save the Commando. Despite Dennis Poor's poo-pooing of it when MVT collapsed in 1975, he got to cherry-pick the scraps from the official receiver and chose not the Cosworth that he'd championed, but the Wankel. A few production Rotary Nortons were actually sold, and in its much modified racing version pumped out an astonishing 135 bhp with some success. Cosworth went on to blow magic dust with a turbocharger over Ford's jelly mold Sierra in the 1980s, and then again with the Ford Escort in the 1990s. The race engine from the 1970s even made a bit of a comeback in 1988, when a much modified version scored 3 firsts in the Battle of the Twins series.
In the early going of the 75-mile Battle of the Twins event, Lewis unleashed the Cosworth's power and put the Quantel creation into the lead. It had been a long time since a British import had led at Daytona.
But who am I kidding? It was actually Bert Hopwood's ancient design that saved the Commando, as you can still buy a brand new Commando today with its echoes of Mr. Hopwood. It's still got echoes of all the niggles the old Commando possessed too, with Norton recently issuing a stop-ride recall for all Commando 961s built between June 2021 and February 2025, due to an issue that could cause what the company rather understatedly calls the vehicle coming to a sudden stop during operation. Norton is due to announce its new range at the Milan Bike Show on the 4th of November, and it's rumoured the 961 won't be continued, although I can't imagine the Commando name will be left on the shelf. Let's hope not. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing to let YouTube know we're doing something right here at 3 Phils. Thank you.